Welcome everyone. Hi everyone, I'm Tom Holmes, founding director of Brand Performance. As you know, a technology agnostic consultancy. We do digital transformation, and the last 10 years we've been helping businesses to solve their HR and finance problems. And yes, I say 10 years, we are 10 years old last month. And today, Sid and I are going to be talking about the gaps which are emerging in talent, what the new normal looks like, and transition to new premises and all that kind of stuff, which, you know, in our pre-chats we now know is at top of Sid's mind at the moment. So please use the Q&A box to ask your questions. And of course, the chat function also is working, and I'll be picking up questions as we go. But before we get started, Sid, could you tell us a little bit more about you, your experience, and also a little bit about HFW and what that is, because we're not, you know, I've got a vague understanding, but I'd love to hear more.
Thanks, Tom. And firstly, thank you very much from Varan for the opportunity to come and have a conversation with you, Tom, today. So Sid Welham, I'm the COO of HFW. Some might remember the firm as Holman Fenwick Willen, so a long-standing law firm. About 1,100 staff, fee earners and business services across 21 offices around the globe. Very much a sector-focused law firm, so our roots in shipping law, but expanded over the last number of years across commodities, construction, energy, insurance, and aerospace. So, you know, real breadth of across various sectors, but also real depth in each of those sectors. So really interesting work that the firm does. As I say, about 1,100 people across 21 offices. So some of those offices are quite small, but our largest office in London, circa 400 people in London, sort of relatively evenly split between fee earners and business services. That's very much the centre. As for me, I've been at HFW now for just over 2.5 years. Yeah, what are 2.5 years? So just got my feet under the table when the pandemic came upon us. So that's been quite an interesting couple of years. Prior to that, I had 8 years at KPMG, based out in the Wharf, as in various sort of operations roles, predominantly around the financial services division over there, and with a bit of program directing around building up the cyber practice, and had the opportunity to help with flipping the target operating model through 90 degrees, which big four firms want to do every now and again. So that was good fun. And then prior to that, the best part of 20 years as an infantry officer in the British Army, serving a variety of roles and locations around the globe. So yeah, possibly not the most obvious journey to become CEO of HFW, but it's been an interesting one, and lots of great experiences on the way.
So Sid, 2.5 years. So how many days or weeks did you get seeing what the old operations and the way it used to work pre the world changing?
No, so I arrived at the firm in September. When was that? September. I'm trying to think of 19. September 19. So I had about 4 or 5 months. And, you know, we had the pandemic started coming upon us. I think it was at February, March 20. So I'd enjoyed a couple of trips out to some of our offices. I was just sort of getting around to understanding which way was up, and then it was all change and across the network, and very much sort of working from home and working through that, all the issues that have come with. In many respects, I think I've got to know people across the firm better, because sort of CEO role in a circumstance such as that, you are sort of coordinating and directing traffic quite a lot. So it has allowed me to reach out to a lot of people that I may not have had as much communications with in the normal run of things. So from my perspective, in many ways, it sort of helped me, but I didn't have that opportunity to see the firm.
I imagine as COO, operating officer, it was kind of like pretty pointed at you, quite a lot of the stuff which needed to. So I imagine they must have been in-depth, intimate conversations, really trying to work out navigation.
Yeah, very much so. And there's the practicalities of running the operation and making sure that we're still serving the clients, and the sort of rollout of IT and making sure that we could connect and connect internally and connect with our clients. But there was also, obviously, as the pandemic extended on, was just understand the implications for the staff, the staff as a whole and staff as individuals. So there's very much more of a focus on are we looking after people right? What can we do to help everybody get through it? I mean, I recall, I was talking to somebody the other day about that first bit of working from home in the sort of spring and summer of 2020, which in the UK, we had a fantastic spring and summer, and everybody thought this was absolutely wonderful, and it's been interesting to see how people's attitudes have changed, throughout the pandemic, that novelty factor at the front end when the weather in the UK particularly was great, replaced by some people really finding it hard working at home and in sort of, despite this ability to connect digitally, still finding it quite a struggle and feeling quite isolated. So, having to think about that through. So it was distinctly the operation side of it. And, yes, I'm the COO, but like any good COO, I've got a team of experts around me who do all the work and sort of I can rely on. And I'm very fortunate to have, a really good team.
Tearing up the 100-day plan must have been.
Yeah, there was very much, that was absolutely the case. So yeah, it was a bit of a, we were starting to really put some plans in place to what we wanted to do, and we had to sort of put some of those on hold and have a bit of a rethink pretty early on. So
okay, so thanks for that, Sid. And I want to kick off with actually a question which has been kind of in my mind for a while. We've heard a lot about the Great Resignation and all that stuff earlier on. We know it's been. Is that still going on? Is that over? Is the Great Resignation still with us? What's your view of that position?
So the Great Resignation, interesting phrase or concept. I did have a quick read of a CIPD article that came out in February on this, and I do think we have to remember what came ahead prior to the Great Resignation, which was what was termed in this article as the Great Suppression. So when we had the pandemic, hiring levels went down. Understandably, firms sort of closed down. People didn't want to move. If they were in secure jobs, they were happy, to have the security at the time of great uncertainty, in organizations and businesses that they knew. So there was very little movement, and that's pretty well catalogued for the best part of 2 years. So I don't think it's come as any great surprise that there's a lot of movement in the market, and there is, we are seeing still a lot of movement in the market and churn. The Great Resignation, I think what people are pointing that to is that everybody's sort of just giving up their jobs and having a complete, having a lifestyle change and what have you. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm seeing a huge amount of that. We have had a couple of people saying, right, coming to London is just not my thing, not even in a hybrid way. I just want to be close to home. Or people have just, a couple of people started their own businesses. But I would say it's more, if people are resigning as such, that it's more about just moving in the job market. And, I think, moving onwards and upwards, whether that be salary, role, what have you, is still the prevalent reason for moving.
Right.
And I think the market is busy at the moment because it's been very quiet for 2 years. And
interesting. So your analysis is that the kind of slightly, I wouldn't say hysterical, but the view that we're all going to change our lifestyles, take up farming and stuff like this, and completely change and deliver dreams and other aspirations which occurred for years. That's not the real driver. You're actually saying your analysis is that it's kind of 2 years of pent up restrictions, which is now being executed. So that overall, it's simply that we're catching up, much like many of our kind of services, etc., on a kind of pent up and stored up demand.
That chimes with what I'm seeing. We are seeing a couple more people choosing to do something quite different, but still the vast majority of our lawyers are moving to other legal, other law positions, and our business services are staying within business services, but they've got wide employability, so they may not be going to another law firm. They might be going to a Big Four or a bank or an insurer or something like that. Yeah, but the pace of that change is that is pretty sharp at the moment.
Yes, but that is because there's a lot of catching up. I mean, I was listening to talk about the in the NHS and the fact that they're so busy at the moment trying to catch up. But it's not that there are more people ill. It's simply that.
Yeah, it's the writing of having had 2 years of a very extreme situation. that directed certain behaviours. I mean, like I was born and brought up in Pembrokeshire, a lovely part of the UK. If I didn't have a mortgage and anti-career aspirations, I'd be applying to the National Park in Pembrokeshire to be a warden there. That'd be fantastic. But I think
you're not doing it. That's
no,
yes.
and I think the reality for most people is they've still got a mortgage, they've still got commitments and what have you. So I'm not quite as big a buyer that the Great Resignation, if there is a Great Resignation, is anything much more than a job market that's sort of slightly overheated because it's catching up on 2 years of very little activity.
Yes. The one feature which I think I'm really interested in your comment on is that a lot of people are saying that it's affecting both the fee earner and service providers end of things, so that the guys we'd normally expect there to be significant churn in a natural business cycle, but also it's quite tough on the back office and support services as well. Is that something you recognise?
Absolutely. I'd say we're probably seeing a higher level of churn at the moment in our business services teams. And I speak to CEOs in other law firms and more broadly, and that's no different to anybody else. There is a lot of movement in the market. We're of a firm of a certain size. So, if you've got an individual, real talent that's moving up, we have only so many directors of, heads of within our business services. We've got some very talented mid-level managers coming through for them to move on, but I don't think that's any different to the normal order of things and the normal progression. And I'm always pleased. Well, I'm not always pleased to lose great talent. Of course, I'm not. But I'm always pleased to see good people moving forward in their careers, and I'm always like to think we're supportive of that. And we would like to see good leaders who think they've benefited from their time at HFW. And that's always been my sort of outlook. KPMG, don't hold people back, and help people, help. But
this is a kind of slightly important and seismic change, I think, because when we talked about the war of talent pre-pandemic and during the pandemic, we were all talking about the people who are most specialist in our services, the people who are and actually, I think that a churn in most firms is actually equally problematic in the roles which we would previously have seen as more stable and more service-led. And I think that is very interesting, that the competition for really great HR people, the competition for really great finance people and stuff like that is really taken off.
Absolutely, and it's across the spectrum. So you mentioned HR and finance, it's IT, it's marketing, it's risk and compliance, it's across the piece. I think businesses, certainly the legal sector, the disruption in the market and what the legal clients are demanding in terms of not just legal advice, they want broader advisors, is elevating the position of business services in law firms in terms of being the facilitators, the enablers of to support the legal advice that's given to clients and offer a broader offering.
Yeah, and I think it's quite interesting because there's also a lot of talk about inflation in wages and all this kind of stuff as well, which I think is starting to come through, I imagine, in various different aspects, and also leading to people taking a new view of the market.
Indeed. I mean, I think there is absolutely no doubt there's wage inflation. It's been certainly within the sort of legal press. It's been largely focused on newly qualified salaries, and that clearly then moves up the chain. But equally, we are seeing that sort of price inflation across the business services. So it's a very competitive market. And whilst we are losing talent, there is in the same we've made some fantastic hires recently, but its cost of doing business therefore goes up because you're just having to do more recruitment activity that distracts the HR team, the recruitment team from mainstream and the levels of activity they might normally be configured to sort of process. So it just, and when you lose somebody, you lose the corporate knowledge that they've built up from the firm. So there is a cost to it, but I also recognize that we've managed to make some fantastic hires in recent months. So and those recent hires, whilst they don't clearly come with the corporate knowledge of the firm, they do come with fresh ideas and fresh energy. So there are pros and cons to it all.
It is interesting because one of the responses, of course, looking for different sources of talent and skills, which we can kind of train up, etc. And you know, you yourself actually transitioned from one career to a really different career.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of us think about ex-military guys and stuff like this as potential, you know, really exciting talent. So can you tell us a bit about that transition and what your thoughts are about whether it's a, well, you know, is it a good place to find a COO?
Well, you'd have to. I'm clearly very biased, so you'd have to ask others on that specific point. I mean, there are a couple of CEOs in the legal sector I know who are ex-military. I mean, I think you know, if you think about the sort of key qualities of a chief operating officer, you know, some of those attributes are clearly transferable skills that people in the military would have. I mean, I think, you know, it was a big it was and is a big change for anybody to step across from a career in such a, what's the word, distinct
command and control, I imagine. It's kind of,
there's a bit of that. So that is often a bit of a hesitation for recruiters, because they have the perception that the military works in this very hierarchical, very command and control function. But actually, the reality of it all is that the military, the British military, and if anybody's been following the conflict in Ukraine, some of the commentators have pointed out the difference. So the, you know, what's being cited about the Russian military is that they operate through very directive command, which is the junior levels can't operate until they're giving a very clear command from their seniors above. The British military and very much the Western militaries operate a thing called mission command, where they sort of go, this is what we want to achieve. You go and work out how you're going to achieve it, and you know, here are the resources that you have to do so. And that's not that dissimilar. And certainly, when I was command troops or working any role I had in the military, if you came up with some sort of crazy plan, the troops aren't very slow at telling you that it's a crazy plan and putting you right, because the stakes are quite high. So I think there's a real difference between perception and the reality of it.
And that's much more of a corporate way of working, isn't it? So you're setting the outcomes and the objectives and then providing resources, but the how you do it and how you achieve it is then down to the individual creativity and skill and experience of the person leading that area.
Well, it comes back to when I was commanding a subunit in the military, say out in Afghanistan. I had a bunch of attached arms who were experts in what they did. That's no different to the experts that head up the various business service functions that I work with now. I sort of alluded to the fact that I work with a fantastic team. I don't have the depth of knowledge that they have in their particular functions. My role is about harnessing that knowledge, weighing up the context, the bigger picture, and giving some direction. But it's very much, you know, I like to think I try and give my teams the opportunity to sort of just move, you know, crack on without too much direction from me. You know, I'm there to come back to if they need to, and oversee and ensure that we're sort of meeting the requirements of the wider business. But I haven't got the capability or ability to get into the detail or capacity, and that's their job, and that's very much how the military works.
Right. So this is a significant difference from what it was even kind of 10 or 15 years ago. This is very interesting to know, because, you know, if that command and control, and it's more about objectives and driving that actually makes that source of people far more flexible and far more useful potentially than it was before. But how do we, you know, I know you're involved with, you're committed to helping that sector and that move. So tell us how we might engage with this, and what your thoughts are if we did want to broaden our horizons in that direction as well. What are your thoughts?
Well, so, you know, I think as we discussed, war for talent, or whatever, however you want to term it, the market's hot. And so I've always been a believer that, you know, why close any talent pool off to a business, because you're just denying yourself, you know, you're limiting where you can recruit from. The military is smaller than it's ever been. The British military, sure, is smaller than it's ever been. So fewer people have contact with people in the military. I would sort of raise that the military, like a few other professions, maybe the NHS we just touched on, invest so much time in training in their people. And so the corporate pool can't afford to invest that level of time and training. So the military, you know, people coming to the military have had a huge amount of training investment, whether it be leadership or technical skills and what have you. In terms of how if people did want to sort of consider someone from the military, there are various organisations that support military folk transitioning into the city. Some of them are sort of have been well established for a number of years. And there's the Armed Forces Covenant, and through the Armed Forces Covenant, which is how the military are trying to engage with the commercial world, there is the clear lines and support to be able to connect people in that way. But what's happened in recent years, well, maybe not even so recent years, but within certain sectors, a number of the firms and the employees in those sectors who are supportive and have seen the benefits of military folk coming into their businesses have set up forums or committees or networks or what have you to try and bring together a collective interest and to support both the individual's transition from the military and the employers who might not understand quite how it all works and what routes individuals might come into. So I was pretty heavily involved in this initially at KPMG, when we started bringing service leavers into KPMG, and that worked pretty. And whilst I was there, we connected with a number of the other city firms and set up what is now the City Veterans CIC, so a community interest company, and that's now in its nearly 10th year of existence. And that's just I wouldn't know what number of firms are signed up to that, but you've got banks, you've got the Big Four, you've got some of the brokers, you've got investment houses and what have you. So if you're someone from the military looking to go into that space, you can sort of reach out to them, and that organisation is committed to supporting people. They've got a website, thecityveterans.org, I think it is. And then since coming into the legal sector, which possibly hadn't recognised the opportunity to do that, we've set up the Military and Law Network, which is, the objectives are exactly the same. They are to engage with the MOD and the various bodies in the MOD who help people transition, and they're also to support the individual that are coming through and speak to employers to both advertise what folk within the military can bring to the party, and also help them think through how they might onboard someone. The only issue is, not the only issue, but part of the issue is that military folk have existed in a world where there's jargon and speak and ranks and all that sort of thing, which a lot of people don't understand. And if you've been in that space for quite some time, the individuals often struggle to articulate what their skill sets are and how they're transferable. So these sort of organizations I've been talking about trying to help both parties understand what the individual can bring to bear.
Very interesting. So in this area, there's kind of two needs. We need to consider this as a route for great recruits, but also there's opportunities to support in helping that transition and translation of one language to the next. I mean, I'm so excited about the idea of bringing people who are otherwise excluded from one or other part of work and second careers and stuff like that back into the market. I think the pressures we're seeing at the moment means that it's absolutely crucial. And I think that this is one great route to do that with established networks already in place. So what we'll do is after the call, we'll post out to everybody the relevant website for the City Veterans CIC. I'm imagining I don't have to be a lawyer or a broker or something like that to go and chat to them, or even be in the city. I can talk to them.
No, and it's all about bringing highly trained, great, very motivated talent into firms, so that will benefit the firm and benefit the individual and give them a sort of second career. I mean, so if I look at HFW, my head of IT is ex-military, ex-Royal Signals, which is all, Signals is a very outdated phrase, but it's all about IT communication. My head of cyber is, the military have quite a lot of very technical cyber people coming out. I've got a number of project managers who are ex-military. Talking about HR, I've got a ex-Royal Navy reservist. She's heading up our graduate recruitment team. So, certainly we benefit in HFW. I've seen it work very well at KPMG. I think it's just having the openness to consider someone who doesn't naturally tick the boxes in the manner that we would traditionally think of them ticking the boxes.
Yes. But those skills, those three first areas you mentioned are the highest competitivity areas in the whole labour market. So and then these guys are pretty well trained in it, which is amazing. If we can
in no way wishing to sell any of the individuals coming out the military short, but they're generally quite good value because they're coming from a government institution that pays at a certain level, and quite often it's their first or second run at something in the commercial corporate space. So they're pretty good value. And if you can get them through the networks, there's no agency fee. So it's just win-win as I see it. But I would say that.
Well, thank you for telling us about that, because that is absolutely, well, firstly fascinating, and also, you clearly know a lot about it and are very invested in making that happen. So that was really useful. Now, I've got moving back to this thing. I mean, do you think this is all going one way? This cost of doing business. I mean, the inflation in wages and stuff like that, and all this other stuff. Surely we're in a bit of a bind over the next few years, or is there kind of other ways around that? What are your thoughts on that, Sid?
I think it is starting to go in one direction. So I think, for instance, the government's brought out a new Crime Finance Act, which requires higher levels of due diligence on onboarding customers or clients rather, and what have you. So that, that puts, more emphasis on both our fee earners, but also our risk and compliance team. So that's one thing. There's the wage inflation we've just discussed. I don't think that's going in directions, that's going to be reversed anytime soon. I mean, the market, if you look back 10, 20 years, the market does have, spikes in wage inflation, and then, that settles down a little bit after a couple of years. So I wouldn't say it's inevitable it'll just continue going upwards, because there have been writing points. If you look back in, since say 2008, there's been writing points. The market spikes, and I think that wage inflation is similarly, it's off the back of a bit of suppression for 2 years. Again, firms pulled their horns in a bit because they weren't quite sure of the future and how things were. So in the same, well, it's cart and horse, isn't it? What's come first, the higher inflation and then the rapid competitive market and movement in the market, or is one driving the other? So I think there is certainly an upward movement in the cost of doing business in the legal sector. If I reflect on my experience from being in the financial services division at KPMG, where, following the 2008 crisis, you saw the regulator imposing themselves and you might say gaining greater teeth, large fines on financial institutions. So they had to, institute big PPI programs and what have you, the PPI mis-selling programs.
Yes.
So I think, and the legal sector is in a similar position. There's the regulation will, I think the regulation will go one way to ensure that we've got, and the regulators, that's what they're there for, as a check and balance, to ensure that business continues in a safe and sustainable way. But the cost of that will, I think, will go upwards.
It is interesting, isn't it? The burden of I mean, it feels like we've had a little bit of a holiday from regulatory further pressures over the last couple of years, as just doing business has been the most critical thing. But and we were promised some regulatory reduction just before the COVID crisis, if we think back to that point. But I think you're right. Doing business is more complicated than it was before, irrespective of whether it's regulatory or other pressures. It is more complicated to get our message and products out than I think it's ever been before, and that's just driving higher skills, which then pushes us into the inflationary side, I think. But it is interesting. I mean, I also understand that you're kind of changing the employee proposition at HFW to really drive kind of changes to the experience, including, believe it or not, planning to move offices. So how on earth? Where did that come from, and how have you been planning that during a long period of lockdown? So we're constantly, with 21 offices across the globe, we are constantly with, there's a lease coming up, or there's an office move coming up. So we've just moved our office in Singapore to not too far away, but that's moved into very much a hybrid configuration to support hybrid work. So again, the team out there, with a bit of support from our global property manager, who's ex-military, has that's gone off really very well, off the back of hard work and a lot of thinking and engagement with the team out there and the staff out there and what they want, and how that will work going forward. Close to home, we've got a lease event coming up, so we're in negotiation at the moment for a new office space, and we're having to, we've engaged with a space planner and architect and our people to really think about what we want from that space. And right. that's balanced with cost, outgoings and what have you, as you might, so back to cost of doing business is clearly a real, issue. And
what impacts the bottom line, but then balancing that off for, I dislike this phrase war for talent, but it is the war for talent, I guess, but delivering a really first-class office space that attracts people and gives a good justification of why people want to or need to make the commute to come into the office.
Yes. So tell me, you mentioned hybrid-ready offices both in Singapore and the UK, and that's an objective. What does that mean? What is a hybrid ready? What's the difference between a hybrid-ready type environment and the kind of thing we might have we're used to in our
what we're used to, I can tell you. So we're in Friary Court, just off Lloyd's Avenue, which, given our sort of our sector focus, is understandable. The location, it's not a brilliant location. It's a little bit of a quiet location, but the offices, has been standing for some amount of time, but it's a very cellular office space, and it's classically, people have their allocated office and what have you, and it doesn't, it's not well set up, and because of the actual floor plate, it doesn't offer us the ability to reconfigure readily. And what's recognized is that, moving forward, we need to have more collaboration, and we need to make the office, a bit of a social destination as well. So those are the sorts of things that we're bringing into the new office design. And that's through, as I say, a significant amount of engagement with every grade within the office, people across the office, to understand what we want. And the office will be, as I say, more agile, more hybrid. There'll be better collaboration spaces, recognizing that the office is not just there for work. People come to work to socialize. We spend an awful lot of time with our work colleagues. So, needing to think about how you're going to use the office location as a venue, as a multi-use venue is important. So it's, it's a, as you say, a significant amount of work, and it's been interesting trying to progress it during COVID, but also, that's been interesting in terms of understanding what people want from their workspace moving forward, because, you go from what we've traditionally been in overnight, literally, to everybody working from home. And it's, we only really came back to the office properly at the end of January. So we had some people coming back in the autumn, not really in particularly high numbers. And I'm speaking about the UK, as I say, across our network, it's been different for each office, depending on the situation they face. But in London, we've only really been back in the office in decent numbers, probably since the end of January, when the sort of the Christmas lockdown the government imposed was lifted. So we're only really 3 months into it. So there's a real sort of, everybody's trying to sort of get to this new balance of, how's it all working out. So we're having to take those sort of considerations in, but it's against a really clear backdrop of that people want an office that facilitates collaboration, can be also used as a social space, because that's a really important thing. And think I'm of a certain age. I can vaguely remember my sort of early 20s. Certainly, I went into an officers' mess in the military, which I thought was brilliant, and that was very much my social hub. Where we hope to move will be a great central location. Great for access, but great for shopping and after office hour activities. Pubs, bars, and all that. So those are the things that are important to people. Great end of, as I know it's called now, end of journey facilities. So, bicycle racks, decent showers and all that sort of thing. So it's really understanding what's important to people and why they might go through the time and effort of commuting in. And what,
because it is interesting, the move, you're describing in part a move from the kind of cellular office to a collaborative space. We've all got our cellular office. I've got my cell at home. My study is now my cellular office, as I'm sure it is with most of your colleagues. Because frankly, if I really need to get my head down over a period and really concentrate in a completely isolated manner, then that's where I tend to do that kind of work. Whereas, yes, but trying to physically express collaboration is such an exciting opportunity, I think, and it is
I think excitement is the key word that I think we're all of us that are involved in this project are feeling, the excitement of what we can deliver. I don't think so. So please don't get me wrong. We are providing quiet rooms, as we're calling them, effectively offices that can be booked, because lawyers absolutely do need that time, and depending on people's personal circumstances, they may not have a study at home. particularly if
Yes.
I think about some of our juniors, they're flat sharing, and it's not appropriate that they're sat around the communal kitchen table to do casework. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why people need to come into the office. So it's about providing a real spectrum and range of environments for people to work in. So there's more open environments, but we've still got project rooms and quiet rooms and booths, and so it gives you this far more breadth of sort of location you can work in.
I mean, in our business, we've got kind of like 90 digital transformation consultants, and pretty much they are able to work from whatever location they wish. However, in recent months, what I'm seeing is we have quite a nice environment. It's a big old warehouse and stuff like that, one of those Victorian ones. And people really love coming in, and they sit in the open plan thing. Now, I kind of think, God, it's much harder to make a phone call in that environment. It's much harder to do that stuff. But that's not the point. They're getting something that, everyone's appreciating that kind of togetherness at the same time, and just interacting with people. Now, I thought that was going to be just a few moments, but it hasn't. It's continued, and more people really value coming in. And in our case, it's an open opportunity. You can if you want to, and you don't have to at any point if you don't want to, in our case. But I'm surprised how it isn't the novelty of coming back to the office which is driving this. People are actually getting a lot of fun, a lot of interaction, a lot of value out of being in what is really a kind of slightly harder environment to do much of their work. But there we are.
Yeah, I think there are we acknowledge the things about having the quiet, so things like noise cancelling headphones when you're sat at a desk in a more open space. So and there's I've been amazed and educated about the sort of acoustic baffling that can go on to absorb noise, so it keeps because that has been voiced as a concern for from our lawyers, is that the ability to have in sufficiently quiet to be able to concentrate and get into work and what have you. But there's such a whole range of things you can bring, and then if you walk around the city and go into coffee shops, the amount of people with the laptops open who are enjoying a flat white and getting on with work is, you see that in every coffee shop. So my direction to the team I'd like to make our internal sort of cafe, if you like, feel like a high-end coffee shop, and
Yes.
get a sense of buzz, but not so much that people can't get their laptops open and be clearing down their emails and what have you.
So come on, Sid, are you offering everyone free coffees?
No, we've done that plenty. we've gone through a number of incentivizing people to get back in and have a coffee. We run a thing called, as you touch on that, we run a digital coffee over the period of pandemic called Barista Twister. So
Yes.
if you wanted to get involved, you put your name in and you randomly be paired with someone every month from somewhere in the firm, wherever in the network. And that's gone down fantastically well. And it's literally a 10-minute chat. It's not work, it's personal. How are you getting on? How's it all going? What are your interests? Have you got a family? And that's been a real boon to bringing together people across the network who would not normally speak to each other. In normal times, they just didn't have any cause to get together, and it's been a fantastic initiative, and for a global firm, it just really brings the connections across the network together. So so whether it's a physical flat white or a digital Barista Twister, that's good in my book.
But I like the free coffee business, because it horrifies me, particularly for my younger colleagues. Coffees are almost £3 a pop. And if you have 2 or 3 of them a day, or 10 a week, that's a hell of a lot of cash going to what. Well, I'm a Nescafe fan myself, so
no. The pandemic hooked me on Nespresso. So again, in the direction of that high-end coffee shop, the free coffee on tap has to be of really good quality.
So, Sid, it's been delightful to talk to you today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm really interested in your insights, and particularly reopening up to my mind other sources of real skill and talent in what is a real difficult market. And I'm kind of excited about thinking about that and trying to figure out how I can engage with that. We will post information about that area outside. And I'm also excited about learning about FW and the stuff you're doing there. So thank you very much for joining today.
Great. It's been great fun. Thanks, Tom.
Brilliant. And for everyone joining us online, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I hope you've picked up some interesting tips and knowledge as I have. So thank you very much for joining. Have a great rest of your day.